There's a moment in every great quarterback's career where the people around him stop coaching him and start learning from him. For Shedeur Sanders, that moment didn't happen in year 5. It didn't happen after a Pro Bowl selection or a playoff run. It happened in a training camp practice session in the middle of a jog-through rep when a seasoned NFL quarterback coach had to admit, out loud, on the record, that he couldn't keep up with what a second-year quarterback was seeing in real time. That's not a storyline being manufactured by fans or analysts pushing an agenda. That's a football coach telling the truth about what he watched with his own eyes. And once you understand exactly what was said and what it actually means, the entire debate around Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns changes permanently. Because this isn't about hype anymore. This is about evidence, and the evidence is overwhelming. Mike Bajakian has spent his entire professional life studying quarterbacks. His career is built around one specific skill: understanding how signal callers read defenses, process information, and make decisions under pressure. He's watched hundreds of practices, broken down thousands of reps, and spent more hours in film rooms than most people spend sleeping. So when Bajakian opens his mouth to describe a quarterback, he's not reaching for feel-good language. He's not trying to sell tickets or calm a fan base. He's a technician speaking in technical terms. And what he said about Shedeur Sanders stopped people in their tracks. Bajakian described a specific moment during a training practice where Shedeur completed a throw and then immediately came to him with an observation. Not a question, an observation. Shedeur pointed out the positioning of a safety in the defense's alignment and explained precisely what that positioning told him about the coverage being run. He wasn't talking in generalities. He wasn't making a broad read like, "I thought it was cover 2, so I went to the flat." He was breaking down a specific safety's depth, his angle, and what that combination revealed about the entire defensive structure behind it, in real time, while the play was happening. Here's where it gets extraordinary. Bajakian admitted that in that moment, standing on the practice field, he didn't fully grasp what Shedeur was pointing out. He had to go back. He had to pull up the film, find the exact snap, freeze the frame, and study the image on a screen. The same image Shedeur had processed with his naked eye at full speed, before he could see what Shedeur had already identified while the play was live. A quarterback coach, a man who has dedicated his entire professional life to this exact skill set, had to go to the film room to catch up to what his second-year quarterback saw standing on the grass. Let that settle for a moment, because it's important to understand what that actually means. Football vision at the NFL level isn't just about having good eyes. Every player in that building has good eyes. Vision is about processing, about the brain's ability to take in enormous amounts of information simultaneously, prioritize what matters, and arrive at the right answer faster than anyone else on the field. Elite quarterbacks see the field differently. They recognize patterns before they fully develop. They identify tells in a defender's stance before the snap even happens. It's a skill that separates the good from the truly special, and it cannot be taught. You either have it or you don't. And according to the man whose entire job is to evaluate exactly that quality in quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders has it at a level that exceeds what coaches can track in real time. That's not a compliment, that's a diagnosis. But Bajakian wasn't finished. Once he started talking about Shedeur, he couldn't stop at just the vision. He went further, and what he said next adds another layer to an already compelling picture. He spoke specifically about Shedeur's ability to throw the football into the deep portions of the field, not just arm strength, but timing, placement, and the willingness to launch the ball into windows over defenders with precision. He described the deep ball as a genuine weapon in Shedeur's arsenal, something that functions as a real threat rather than a low-percentage desperation heave. He attributed this ability to two things: natural talent and elite-level coaching at the collegiate level. Colorado's offensive system under Deion Sanders clearly prepared Shedeur in ways that are still paying dividends. The footwork, the timing, the understanding of spacing. These aren't things Shedeur is learning on the job in Cleveland. He arrived with them already dialed in. Bajakian acknowledged this directly, stating that Shedeur came into the NFL with a command of the game that most quarterbacks don't develop until their 4th or 5th year in the league. Think about what that actually means from a development standpoint. The typical quarterback learning curve in the NFL is steep. Year 1 is survival, year 2 is adjustment, year 3 is when you start to see the real player. By year 4 or 5, if a quarterback has the right coaching and hasn't been destroyed by a bad situation, the game starts to slow down for him. Bajakian is saying Shedeur skipped that entire process. He came in already there. The football IQ, the vision, the understanding of coverage structures and defensive tendencies, he arrived in Cleveland with all of it preloaded. That changes the timeline. That changes the ceiling, and it absolutely changes the conversation about whether this kid belongs behind center for the Cleveland Browns. Now here's what makes Bajakian's comments particularly significant. He's not operating in isolation. He's not a lone voice going out on a limb with a bold take. Todd Monken, the Browns' offensive coordinator, the man who is actually responsible for designing and running this offense, the man whose job depends on his quarterback performing at a high level, has been saying the same thing independently. Monken stated publicly that Shedeur Sanders has made significant progress and is far ahead of where he was at the start of last season. From a coordinator who was actively choosing his starting quarterback, not managing a depth chart, not keeping competition open for leverage, that is a declaration. Think about what it means when two football professionals working in different capacities within the same organization arrive at the same conclusion without coordinating their messaging. This isn't a press release. This isn't a team-wide directive to pump up the young quarterback's confidence heading into camp. Bajakian watches Shedeur from the quarterback coach lens, technique, mechanics, reads, footwork. Monken watches from the coordinator lens, scheme fit, decision-making within the system, how the quarterback's choices affect the entire offensive structure. These two men are looking at Shedeur through completely different filters, asking completely different questions, and walking away with the same answer every single time. He's the one. When two independent football minds with different responsibilities and different evaluation frameworks reach identical conclusions from their own observation, that's not opinion, that's convergence. That's the kind of agreement that gets built over thousands of reps, hundreds of hours of film, and direct daily contact with the player. The Cleveland media can dismiss a fan's optimism. They can wave off an analyst with an agenda. But dismissing the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator who work with Shedeur every single day, that requires a different kind of intellectual dishonesty entirely. While all of this noise was building in the Cleveland media ecosystem, the debates, the hot takes, the relentless skepticism, Shedeur Sanders was in Colorado, not answering questions, not firing back on social media, not calling into radio shows to defend himself. He was in Colorado, working, training independently, getting his body right, getting his mind sharp, preparing for a training camp that doesn't start until late July as if it starts tomorrow. This is not an accident. This is who Shedeur is, and it's been who he is his entire life. He grew up in one of the most scrutinized households in American sports. His father is Shedeur Sanders, a Hall of Fame athlete, a polarizing media figure, a man who generates headlines simply by existing. Shedeur has never known a version of his life where the spotlight wasn't on him, where opinions about him weren't loud and frequent and often dismissive. He has faced doubters in high school, doubters in college, doubters in the draft process, and doubters now as a professional. Every single time, his response has been the same. He goes out and performs. The Colorado training sessions aren't optional extra credit for Shedeur. They're part of how he's wired. The work ethic that Bajakian praised isn't something he turned on when he got to Cleveland. It's something he brought with him from a lifetime of understanding that talent alone doesn't silence anybody. Performance does. And right now, while the Cleveland media is doing what it always does, manufacturing doubt and feeding skepticism into a machine that runs on narrative rather than evidence, Shedeur Sanders is adding reps, building chemistry within the offensive concepts he's been studying, and arriving at training camp not just ready, but ahead of schedule. That contrast, noise versus work, narrative versus preparation,
tells you everything you need to know about where this story is actually heading.
Let's talk about the numbers, because the Cleveland media has a very particular relationship with statistics when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. They reference them when they're convenient, and they bury them when they're not. But Colin Cowherd, one of the loudest, most consistent sports media voices in the country, went on record recently and laid out a statistical case so clean and so specific that dismissing it requires you to either not understand football or actively choose to ignore what's right in front of you. Cowherd zeroed in on Shedeur's final 7 games as a starter last season, not his entire rookie year, not the full sample that includes the chaos of being thrown behind the NFL's 31st ranked offensive line before he had a chance to find his footing. Just the final 7 games, the stretch where Shedeur had started to settle in, where the offense had started to build some coherence around him, where you could actually begin to see what kind of quarterback he is when the conditions are even marginally functional. In those 7 games, Shedeur Sanders threw more touchdown passes than Josh Allen. Read that again, because it deserves to be read slowly. Josh Allen, the man widely considered the best quarterback in the entire NFL right now, was outpaced at the touchdown level over that same window by a second-year quarterback playing behind a line so bad it gave up 23 sacks during that stretch. 23 sacks! That's not a supporting cast failing a quarterback. That's a quarterback succeeding despite a supporting cast that was actively working against him. And Cowherd didn't stop there. He pointed out that Shedeur matched the touchdown production of Jordan Love and Sam Darnold over that same period, 2 quarterbacks whose teams were operating with functional offensive lines, established weapons, and systems built around their strengths. Cowherd stated publicly that with Shedeur as the starter, he believes the Cleveland Browns can win 6, 7, maybe 8 games this season. He wasn't hedging, he wasn't framing it as a hopeful possibility or a best-case projection. He said it as a matter of what the numbers, the personnel upgrades, and the developmental trajectory all point toward when you look at them honestly. As he put it, you can tell me what you want to hear, but he's going to give you numbers. The numbers say Shedeur was productive, mobile enough, big enough, accurate enough, and that was before the roster around him got better. That productivity didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in some of the worst circumstances a young quarterback can face, and the lesson the Cleveland media keeps refusing to draw from those numbers is a simple one. If Shedeur Sanders did that then, what does he do now with a better line, better weapons, a full year of the system in his head, and a coaching staff that believes in him completely? So why does the skepticism persist? Why does a segment of the Cleveland media keep pushing the narrative that Shedeur Sanders is a question mark when the coaches, the coordinator, the general manager, and the statistical record are all pointing in the same direction? The answer isn't complicated, but it's not flattering either. They're protecting themselves. The Cleveland sports media has built an entire infrastructure of doubt around Shedeur Sanders. They framed him as unproven, as a product of his father's program, as a quarterback who benefited from a controlled college environment that didn't translate to the NFL level. They've invested in that story, and if Shedeur Sanders goes out this season and wins games, if he becomes the quarterback this coaching staff clearly believes he already is, then every column written, every hot take delivered, every segment spent raising questions about his ability becomes a public record of being wrong, spectacularly, undeniably wrong. That's not something media figures recover from easily. When you've been loud, when you've been confident, when you've consistently pushed a narrative that turns out to be false, the audience remembers. So the only play left is to keep the skepticism alive at all costs, to manufacture enough uncertainty that even good results can be contextualized away. A good game becomes one performance. A good stretch becomes small sample size. A winning record becomes the schedule was soft. The goalposts move every time the evidence threatens to prove them wrong, because the alternative is admitting they had it wrong from the beginning.
This is not analysis. This is self-preservation dressed up as journalism. And the louder the Cleveland media gets as training camp approaches, the more obvious it becomes that they can feel the story slipping away from them. When a narrative needs to be defended this loudly, it's usually because the facts have started to contradict it. Here's what's actually coming. When training camp opens in late July, Shedeur Sanders is going to line up behind an offensive line that is materially better than anything he played behind last season. The Browns invested in that unit this offseason because they know the protection issues were the single biggest obstacle to understanding what their quarterback actually is. Give any quarterback 23 sacks in 7 games, and the statistics you produce are going to be distorted. Remove that variable, and the player's true level emerges. He's also going to have weapons around him that change the equation entirely. Jerry Jeudy is a legitimate #1 receiver. Fast, precise, with the route-running ability to create separation against NFL corners consistently. Harold Fannin Jr. brings a dimension to the offense at tight end that gives Shedeur a safety valve, a chain mover, and a red zone threat all in one player. The supporting cast has been upgraded at almost every level, and every upgrade multiplies the production of a quarterback who has already shown he can perform under inferior conditions. And underneath all of that is a full year of Todd Monken's offensive system living in Shedeur's head. There's a massive difference between a quarterback learning a system mid-season while also trying to survive a collapsing pocket and a quarterback who has spent an entire offseason studying that same system with the benefit of hindsight, with film to review, with clarity about what worked and what didn't. Shedeur is walking into training camp with all of that. The mental reps he's putting in down in Colorado right now, going through progressions, studying coverages, refining his understanding of concepts, they're all building toward a version of this quarterback that the Cleveland media hasn't seen yet. But the coaching staff has seen it. They see it every day in practice. And the fact that they're not being diplomatic about it, not hedging their language, not carefully managing expectations the way coaches typically do when they're unsure, that tells you something important about what they believe is coming. Here's where everything lands. The quarterback coach said his vision exceeds what coaches can process in real time. The offensive coordinator said he's far ahead of where he was. The general manager has described his development as extraordinary. The statistics from his 7-game starting run show him outpacing Josh Allen at the touchdown level while absorbing punishment behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league. He's working independently in Colorado while the noise builds around him, adding to a foundation that was already ahead of schedule when he arrived. Every single data point from every single source, coaches, coordinators, executives, analysts, and the stat sheet itself points in the same direction. The only voices pointing elsewhere are the ones with something to lose if Shedeur succeeds, and that's not a coincidence. That's the tell. When training camp opens, when the pads go on, when Shedeur Sanders starts operating behind a functional offensive line with real weapons around him and a full year of the system locked into his football mind, everything that's been said in practice rooms and coordinator meetings and quiet conversations between coaches is going to become visible to the entire world. The coaches already know what's coming. The numbers already told the story. The work in Colorado is already being done. The debate about whether Shedeur Sanders is a starting quarterback in the NFL is over. The only thing left now is watching the rest of the world catch up to what the people around him already know. And when the wins start stacking up, and based on everything the evidence says they will, the conversation won't be about whether he can do it, it'll be about how long people waited to admit they were wrong. That day is coming faster than the doubters are ready for.